What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Total Takedown. This for UFC 291. This is Pub Sports Radio. Make sure you smash that like button for me. Let's get into these numbers. We are looking at overs and unders and not as much looking at sides today. You know the drill. Hit the retweet, hit the like button. Let's go. Now, first fight of the night, you've got Miranda Maverick taking on Priscilla Cachoeira. We've got a 2.5 total here. This is pick'em for women's MMA. Usually, that's a dead nuts over. We've talked about taking advantage of some of these unders because they expect violence, and these days they know when they're going to get it for women's MMA. I do think this is an under spot. You've got the over, it looks like about minus 110, minus 120. The under is minus 120 in most places, and I do think under 2.5 makes sense. Priscilla Cachoeira's entire game plan exists of one big right hand. That's all she has, that's all she does, but if she lands it, she hurts people. Miranda Maverick is slightly smaller, but she's going to be the much better grappler in this situation. I think it's a matter of time before Priscilla Cachoeira slows down, gets tired, gets taken down, and once she's on the ground, she's not the same fighter. I do think Miranda Maverick finishes this fight, but you never know. You could always catch that nuke from Priscilla Cachoeira. Under 2.5 would be the pick. Matt Simmelsberger takes on Uros Medic in the next fight. 1.5 total. Over 1.5 is minus 135. The under 1.5 plus 105. And a lot of people are expecting this to be a round one banger. I actually think I can justify an over 1.5 here in this spot. I'm not sure I'm ballsy enough to bet it, but I think it makes sense. Matt Simmelsberger is incredibly tough, very difficult to finish, and we have seen Uros Medic finished, but you know who did that? My guy Jalen Turner. He's maybe the most prolific finisher in the 155 pound. He's the biggest guy, but he's maybe not the most prolific finisher. He's one of them. Sorry, Charlie O. Forgot you there for a minute. But at any rate, this is going to be a violent fight. Most of Uros' fights only go the first round. He's hardly ever seen the second round. Simmelsberger is a natural 170 who hits harder, and there's going to be a size discrepancy potentially here in this fight. I think we can get up and over that 1.5 as long as Uros Medic minds his P's and Q's. If he doesn't engage in a slugfest immediately at the beginning of this fight, we could see a little bit longer of a duration. CJ Vergara takes on Vinicius Salvador, another 2.5 total. Over 2.5 plus 115, under 2.5 is minus 145. They are expecting violence in this spot, and I get it. The thing I think we can potentially rely on, though, is CJ Vergara's durability. This guy's incredibly hard to finish. His 2 losses have been by submission. One of those, armbar Tatsuro Taira, which, folks, there is absolutely nothing wrong with getting submitted by Tatsuro Taira. And besides that, he's shown that he's just incredibly durable. He's got great cardio, and he pushes a pace throughout the entire 15 minutes. He can take the absolute kitchen sink, and he's willing to do 100-yard sprints to avoid big punishing bombs. Vinicius Salvador is mostly a finisher. He has yet to win a decision in his career. He's got 13 knockout wins. I love the kid. But the thing is, this is a step up in competition. In his last fight, he lost a decision to Victor Altamirano, and he figured out what the UFC level of competition looks like in a hurry there. He's going to be bigger, taller, longer, and he's improving as a younger fighter. I actually think he's going to be tough enough to hang in there with CJ Vergara, keep CJ Vergara at distance with those big knees, the long limbs, the legs, and then I could see CJ struggling to close that distance and the range, not finding as much success with the takedowns because, frankly, he doesn't shoot them. So we could see an over here. We could see this thing go a full 15 minutes, plus 115. I'm actually tempted to kind of flip the script and say this thing goes over. Jake Matthews takes on Darius Flowers, a 1.5 total. This one I'm not so sure on. I do kind of think under 1.5 at minus 105 is maybe the look here. Darius Flowers is coming in here on short notice. It's his UFC debut off the Contender Series. We've seen Jake Matthews get bonked before. We've also seen him get stuck on bottom before. Both those things are things that Darius Flowers could potentially do. But Jake Matthews should be the naturally larger of the two fighters. He's got far more experience, and he's the slicker boxer. He also is a fantastic grappler from top position. I worry about him being on his back, but if he gets on top, he's slick. I could see this thing being an under 1.5 because Darius either comes in here on short notice, KOs Jake Matthews early, which we've seen happen before, or he gets styled on. And if he gets styled on, I don't know that he can last much more than a round and a half with somebody like Jake Matthews. So I'll say violence. I'll say under 1.5. Not one I feel great about. Haven't bet that or anything like that, but I would be tempted on the under there. Roman Hopalov takes on Claudio Ribeiro, another 1.5 the total here. Over 1.5 minus 140, under 1.5 is plus 110. And this is actually kind of the same situation as the last one. People are expecting this to be a one-round banger, but I actually think this is going to be a cardio contest between these guys. I think it's going to come down to who packed more of a lunch bag here on this one. I think Claudio Ribeiro is going to come in hard, use those leg kicks, try to close the range and cause that car crash. Roman Hopalov is going to use his footwork and a jab and try and extend this fight until Ribeiro gets tired. Whoever gasses out first is going to end up on their shield. I think we could see the third round of this fight over 1.5, minus 140 would be the way I'd look. Derek Lewis takes on Marcos Rogerio de Lima in what is the Twitter Civil War of the Week. Kind of. It's mostly just me. It's everybody against me in this spot. Let's go Derek Lewis. 1.5 the total, under 1.5, minus 195. And it's hard to argue that. It's really hard to argue that. But let me just... Big guys at elevation. Sometimes that doesn't work out the way you think it does. Like, instead of these guys just killing each other and death gassing and going unconscious with one punch, they might just lay on each other. Like, what happens if Derek Lewis hits the trip takedown that he got on Tai Tuivasa and sits on Marcos Rogerio de Lima? Do you think Rogerio's going to come out hot in round 2 and have the power to knock Lewis out? I'm not so sure. We could see a clinch against the fence. We could see them leaning on each other like Blagoy Ivanov and De Lima did when they were at UFC Phoenix. Like, there's a lot of ways this fight goes over. If these guys come out slow and tentative in that first round, I think it probably goes all 15 if it hits round 2. So over 1.5 at plus 160, I think is sneaky value. The only problem is, if Derek Lewis is retiring and he's just straight up done, he could cave and fold over. If Marcos Rogerio de Lima is taking too big of a step up in competition, which I personally think he is, Lewis could absolutely exit this guy with a thunderous uppercut. We've seen it happen before. So there's plenty of opportunities for this thing to go under. I don't think I have the balls to bet the over 1.5. I'm just saying I don't want to lay minus 195. Gabriel Bonfim takes on Trevin Giles in the next fight here. Another 1.5 total. Over 1.5 plus 115, under 1.5 minus 145. And I do actually think I like violence here. Now, Trevin Giles has one of the best jabs I've ever seen. His boxing is spectacular, but his gas tank is terrible. And at elevation, I think the UFC knows this. He's coming in here and he's gassed out in the third round of fights before and led to him being finished by submission. That's just music to the ears of Gabriel Bonfim. That's what this guy does. The club and sub, the worn out, tired tap, the tight squeeze, that's what he is all about. I expect this fight to be probably a pretty tough round 1, but as Trevin Giles fades, Gabriel Bonfim is going to bink him and then probably wrap up a neck. I think the under 1.5 makes some sense. Michael Chandler takes on Kevin Holland, 2.5 here, over 2.5 plus 150, under 2.5 minus 185. And I'm struggling with this one, I really am. So Kevin Holland in his last fight really could have gone the full distance with Ponzinibbio. Now, he was fighting with a broken hand in that fight. I do think that's important. That changes things. But he bit down on his mouthpiece and swung for the fences, and I didn't think we were getting an inside the distance or an under. And that fight magically appears deep in that third round. But I can't count on that being the case in this spot. Chiesa has been submitted before, and I do think Holland by sub is super live here. But if he doesn't catch a sub, Chiesa could just be using his grappling prowess, taking this guy down, sitting on top of him. We've seen Kevin Holland struggle with that game plan in the past, and at elevation, if he's tired, he's going to be easier to take down. So I do actually think there is some opportunity for this thing to go over. I could see a scramble, and I could see this thing being a striking match where Chiesa's tough enough to tank the damage, mixed in with some grappling scrambles. My gut says Holland finds that finish eventually, but at the same time, I don't like minus 185 on an under 2.5. I'd rather play a plus money prop. Tony Ferguson takes on Bobby Green in the next fight. 2.5 the total, over 2.5 minus 135, under 2.5 plus 105. And I actually do kind of like the over 2.5 here in this spot. People are expecting Bobby Green to come out and just straight starch Tony Ferguson. I know Tony might be dust. I know he might be done. He might be absolutely shot at this point in his career. But even when he's absolutely shot, like this guy went 5 rounds with Justin Gaethje before he finally collapsed. I don't think this is going to be the guy that comes out and does it. Bobby Green doesn't finish anybody unless he's got the option to headbutt the chinniest guy in the weight class. That's the only time he's finishing anybody. So I don't think Bobby Green can hit hard enough to knock out Tony Ferguson, even at this advanced stage of his career. Tony potentially could catch Green in a sub. He's done it to better men before, and he always has that option of the cut stoppage with the elbows. So this one isn't even an easy, safe pick either. Over 2.5, minus 135. That's the way I'll lean for the show, but I can't bet that because I could see a late finish from either guy. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson takes on Michel Pereira up next. The over 2.5 is minus 220. The under 2.5 is plus 180. And I actually kind of think this is maybe the sneaky one that gets people off guard. So Stephen Thompson didn't show great durability in his last fight against Kevin Holland. When Kevin rocked him and dove on him, on top of him, had him on the ground, like if he had just followed up with ground and pound, that fight very much could have been over. But Holland wanted to play the game. He wanted to strike. He let him back up. He put him back on his feet. And then they kept going from that position. And Wonderboy was able to work his way back into that fight. It could have easily been a round one stoppage, though. I think 40-year-old Wonderboy is maybe starting to show some cracks in the armor. And at this point, Michel Pereira, 29 years old, biggest guy in the weight class, he went out super early to train at elevation to get prepared for it. So even though we question his gas tank, he's absolutely going to be ready for this fight. And if he explodes at the right time, he can catch Wonderboy. And we've seen Wonderboy still got pop in his punches. If he catches Michel Pereira, if he catches anybody, Wonderboy absolutely can still end somebody's night early. I might actually think the sprinkle on under 2.5 plus 180 is in play here in this spot. Jan Blachowicz takes on Michel Pereira up next, a 1.5 total. Over 1.5 minus 145. Under 1.5 is plus 115. And I'm struggling with this one, folks. I'm really, really struggling with this fight. So Michel Pereira, that left hand is going to be available all night on Jan, unless Jan decides he wants to grapple, which he never does. So there's a chance that Jan grinds this thing out and it goes over 1.5 relatively easily. However, both guys can easily finish this fight. I mean, Pereira just got rocked senseless by Israel Adesanya using the same right punch he has always used. And you could see the same exact thing happening if Jan decides to go to that weapon. So both guys have opportunities to finish. Both guys are getting up there in age and older, even though they've been relatively durable throughout their careers. We've seen them finish before. I'm going to lean with this fight doesn't go the distance, but the 1.5. That's a good number, bookies. You got us. I'll say over 1.5 minus 145, but I'm not confident in that whatsoever. Dustin Poirier taking on Justin Gaethje. 2.5 the total. First bet I made. Over 2.5 minus 118. It's minus 130 now. So I hope you guys saw the tweet. I hope you saw the post on Instagram. I bet this over 2.5 as soon as it dropped. I love this over 2.5. Don't go crazy on it. Always remember your bankroll management. But I think the way these guys fight sets up really well. Dustin Poirier is super durable early. He always is and kind of forces himself into a brawl firefight. And then you've got Justin Gaethje who hammers away with leg kicks, but recently has been showing some better fight IQ, dragging fights deeper, taking his opponents into those late waters and drowning him as he's got the opportunity to out-cardio, outspeed, outpace people. The athleticism seems to be on Justin Gaethje's side at this point. I think this is going over again. You know, the last fight finished in round 4. Even though we're at elevation and these guys, you know, we talked about everybody on this card. There's potentials for people to slow down and gas out. Not these two. These two guys go 5 rounds every single time they're in there in a main event with no problem and don't slow down. So gas, all gas, no brakes, pedal to the metal, doesn't matter. These guys will be able to take each other's shots early. And I think we see a late finish or even a decision. Over 2.5. Already bet it at minus 118. I'd still take it at minus 130. That's the total takedown. See you tomorrow for the undefeated post-weigh-in show. Grab your tinfoil hats. You're not going to want to miss this one. Good luck, everybody. And the sharp weigh-in, we got the sharp action report with my guy Andrew tomorrow as well. So come on back. Let's roll.